Hmm? No, he's coming. He's parking. He let the Dakinis off. You're keen to do it? Okay, so we'll do it after the opening prayers and everything. Yeah. Okay, cool. Sweet. What? Yeah, we bowed down already. Or you can bow down again with Harvey. So what does your mind do when you're just sitting around? Nothing particular is happening. You don't have instructions to follow. Just interesting. Where does your mind go? Yeah, you don't have to confess in public, but it can be humbling. Or not. It can be inspiring too. Okay, so please, we will begin with our opening aspiration. And maybe even before our opening aspiration, remembering this beautiful phrase, image, feeling of all beings throughout space. Throughout space, whatever experience you have had, probably many, of the expansiveness of space, looking at the sky, looking across a wide horizon, looking at the night sky, especially if there's not too much city light and you can see stars and the infinity of that expanse. And living beings are everywhere. Living beings in pain like us. Living beings with whom we share our practice. And so we, before practice, we soar in space and just consider, as Avalokiteshvara did, looking down famously, high peak of the world after he thought he had cleared all difficulties away and saw that there was still suffering, and wept. That kind of expansive tenderness. And within that, our 4 aspirations and all the rest. And I suppose nowadays, and we'll say more about this later, really a sense of dedicating also to the land itself, the earth itself, really, really needing healing and blessings. Why not dedicate? We will dedicate for that as well. Okay, thanks.
May all beings always have happiness and its causes. May all beings always be free of pain and its causes. May all beings always be pain-free and live happily. May no beings ever cling to those near nor spurn those far. For as long as space abides, as long as the world remains, just so long may I be there, resolving all beings' pain. In Great Blazing Bliss, page 5. Om Hum Hri, great bliss, blazing power, palace where wisdom wants no bliss and emptiness. Blissful lotus, ones with no wanting, Vajra, some great glory shines from there. True form Amitabha, Dorje, Lokesh, Lord compassion, passionate. Lotus, Lord Master of world and peace, power Heruka outshines all things. Sangwa Yeshe Vajra Varahi, Damsho desire, King great bliss treasure. Mind music Jima rules all mudras, high-low dancing in bliss emptiness. Power wielding Dak and Daki host, you know seen and empty as the same. You dance your Vajra form, shakes through worlds, your laugh in ceaseless speech rouse through realms. Red light rays suffuse all worlds and peace, stir and gather world peace essences. Grant the 2 feet our supreme desire, Vajra passion of your own heart mind. With great Vajra hooks and lassos you bind to great bliss all you know and see. Dance play in the endless magnet like sesame pods burst open with 3 roots power, God host fast array. Bless and grant as with respect I pray. For unhindered city power in all feats high and low that I desire. And Refuge in Bodhicitta, page 12. In 3 real jewels, 3 root bliss-filled ones, channels, winds, bright orbs, this Bodhi mind. Essence, nature, moving love mandal, until full Bodhi I seek refuge. Gunjok sumga deshe tsawasun, salun tile rangshing chanjub sem. Norang Jing Tuje Kyu Korla, Chanjub Ningba Bardu Japsu Chi. In 3 real jewels, 3 root bliss filled ones, channels, winds, bright orbs, this Bodhi mind. Essence, nature, moving love mandal, until full Bodhi I seek refuge. Oh, like moons in water, sights deceive us. We ever roam bound in cyclic chains. So all may rest in their clear mind sphere. I raise Bodhi through 4 boundless states. Oh, Natsognan Wachu De Tsun Reiji, Korwa Lugu Jundu Jamvedro. Rang Rega Sal Ying Sung El Sechir, Zeme Shi Nang Ne Sem Do. Oh, like moons in water, sights deceive us. We ever roam bound in cyclic chains. So all may rest in their clear mind sphere. I raise Bodhi through 4 boundless days. On page 39, mandala offering and request for teachings. This ground perfumed and with flowers strewn, Mount Meru, 4 islands, sun and moon, I give seeing them as Buddha lands, whereby may all enter in pure lands. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamnayatayami. Reflecting on all beings, our specific states of mind, great or lesser, will you please turn our wheel of Dharma now.
Kyabda Gyawanam Tangyer Me Pe Gandrin Sumden Chinchen Lama Che Rizin Jorme Tupden Jatsola So Wadeb Sonyam Len Tarshin Sho.
So settle into a meditative posture. And for this particular practice, you can have your eyes closed if you so prefer, unless you find yourself falling asleep. And then you might want to just open them a little bit with a soft focus looking down. And feel the support of your seat. We each individually are sitting above the center of the earth. So we are supported by this earth. We are supported by our skeletal structure. You can have your neck a little bit elongated with your chin tucked in a little bit. You can experience your central channel as a source of support, if you're familiar with that. And throughout this particular meditation, I encourage you to be aware of what your actual experience is, not what you think it should be, or not what you think I think it should be, but what it actually is. Good, bad, or indifferent. What is your actual experience? It is that form of honest awareness that is both reflective of and a path to our deepest nature. We start just by having a sense of openness in the soles of your feet, a sense that your soles are open to a flow of energy, whatever that might mean to you. Your soles are open and your feet are open to a flow of energy. Your ankles are open into your calves and shins, into your knee area, and then to your upper thighs and upper legs. These areas are all open. To your pelvic area, your buttock area is all open. Lower back, lower tummy, middle back and middle tummy. Up to your upper chest, your upper back. And your hands are open to some flow of energy, Sometimes we might feel a flow of energy going out. We might feel a flow of energy coming in. We might just feel a certain radiation associated with our hands. Our fingers are open, and our palms and the top of our hands and our wrists up to our forearms and our elbows, upper arms into the shoulder area. All of this is open into the neck, throat, jaw, back of the head, ears, cheeks, and the top of our head. In line with Rinpoche's guidance on the body practice, we are open to the full field of our experience, especially in this case, our sensing experience. If you happen to notice sounds, that's excellent. You notice smell or taste, that's excellent. You're not fighting anything. Luxuriant effulgence of experience. Luxurious effulgence of experience. Allow your attention to be at the top of your scalp and just sense that whole area. Front of the scalp, in the middle of the scalp, the rear. You may feel some tightness as if you were wearing a tight ski cap. You might feel some electromagnetic vibration, just a kind of bzzz. Maybe just a very subtle presence, energy going out, energy coming in. Let yourself feel the top of your scalp, whatever you may be feeling. Sense scalp region. The apparent demarcation between where we most typically feel we begin and end at the top part of our body. But maybe that's not the case. Allow yourself to just very gently sense that you're loose, your scalp is loosening and relaxing. My scalp is loose and relaxed. My scalp is loose, gentle, relaxed, and also spacious. Scalp is loose, open, and spacious. And just sense, am I sensing my scalp? Am I sensing spacious awareness? Am I sensing both? Are they alternating? Spacious awareness, scalp, And if it's spacious awareness, is your sense of location as demarcated as it was before? Is your awareness expanding into space? How is that? If it's occurring. And is it okay if it's not occurring? Can you just be with what is? Scalp is totally clear, felt form, or maybe there's some looseness, expansion, spaciousness. And if there is it alternating with a sense of my scalp? Now spacious, and now scalp? Or are they there together? How is that? Is it okay if it doesn't make any sense whatsoever? Allow your attention to move to the forehead area and the sides of your head, the back of your head. Sense your forehead. Part of us, when we get concentrated, sometimes really crunch up our foreheads and might have a lot of tension that we hold in the forehead and our temples, around the top of our ears. Sense your forehead. Maybe you feel the sense of the air touching it, or tension, contraction. You might feel the sides of your head, the back of your head. Might feel quite solid. It's okay. Whatever you feel, maybe it's warm, maybe it's cool. Maybe you feel the wind of the room. Feel, participate, experience of the forehead and the sides of the head, the back of the head. My forehead, the sides of my head, back of my head are loose and relaxed. My forehead and the sides of my head and the back of my head are loose, relaxed, and spacious. Forehead, sides of my head and the back of my head are loose, relaxed, and spacious. And if you feel into that, are you sensing your forehead, sides of your head? Inside of your head, your brain, back of your head. What do those feel like? They're spacious. Can you sense if spaciousness is like thoroughly predominant? Is it coexisting with some sense of your forehead, sides and back of your head, and your brain? Or is it all spacious? And if it's spacious, does it have some boundary? And if it has no boundary, how is that in terms of your sense of self? Just start paying attention to your ears and all the delicate sounds that we're hearing. What's the relationship between those sounds and silence? Do the sounds coexist with silence? Do the sounds occur in space? Where are the sounds occurring as you're hearing? Can you situate where hearing is occurring? I'm going to ring the bell, and instead of identifying where the bell is, allow yourself to experience the sounding, the hearing of the bell. And can you find where the hearing of the bell is occurring in the spaciousness of your experience? And this means really letting go of the localization of the source of the sound and moving into the experiencing of the sound. And that's a particular shift that really needs to be highlighted. Our inclination is to focus on the source of sound and the identity of sound. In this particular moment, I'm encouraging you to enter into the experiencing of sound, and where in the spaciousness of your mind is that experiencing occurring? And into what does it dissolve? And continuing with your cheeks and your back of your head, your mouth. Many of us hold a lot of tension in our mouths. Cheeks, our teeth, our tongue, our jaw, upper jaw and lower jaw, and the joint of the jaw right by the ears where we have TMJ. We know what that feels like. Allow that all to be sensed. The back of the head, around sort of the neck, upper neck area, and into the cheeks and nose, upper lip and lower lip, and our teeth and tongue, allow this whole area to loosen, be relaxed and loose and spacious. My jaw and my cheeks and my lips and my teeth and my tongue, the back of my head are all loose and relaxed. Spacious. Maybe you have a very, very clear sense of your jaw and your teeth and your tongue. That's fine. Maybe the clear sense of them is oscillating with some sense of relaxation and spaciousness. Maybe your head is beginning to disappear, and how is that? Don't worry, you'll be able to walk out of the room. But maybe you've got no felt sense of head. How does that affect our sense of self? Is it okay? Maybe you have a sense of spaciousness and the limitation of your bodily experience and the sensations of your bodily experience at the same moment. That's okay. It's your experience. Maybe you're having some visual, something occurring, or maybe some music in your mind. It's your experience. Maybe you're remembering your shopping list. It's fine. Whatever is your experience is delicately true in the moment. It is the expression, the luxurious effulgence in the moment, called in Tibetan gsal. Can you feel into your throat and your neck? Just allow that area to be sensed, your throat and your neck. Can the throat and my neck be loose and relaxed? Spacious. And then move into the upper chest and upper back area. Some of us hold a fair bit of tension and armoring in this area. Upper chest, upper back, up to the heart region. The heart here being kind of the emotional heart, which would be in the center of the chest. Can we allow our upper chest and upper back, the whole region, the whole upper region encased by the upper rib cage, our lungs and our heart, both our physical heart on the left side there and our emotional heart, which is more in the center, like the heart chakra. Can we be very, very tender, very, very gentle with our awareness of what may be going on in this region? There may be some contractions, there may be some solidification, there may be some tremors, there may be fluidity, looseness, tender-heartedness, open-heartedness. in our whole upper chest, upper back, be loose, relaxed, open, tender, spacious. And do we have some sense of spaciousness? Do we have some sense of our embodiedness, our sensing experience? Is a sense of being embodied in that upper part of our body clear? Is it tense or solid, fluid or open? Is there a sense of spaciousness? Is it alternating with the sense of our embodied sensing? Is it coexisting with our sensing? What is your personal experience? And is it okay to have your personal experience and know it? Is it okay to be fully accepting of your current personal experience? Is there some voice suggesting you should be experiencing something else or doing something else? It's okay to be aware of that voice with tenderness and spaciousness. Do you have any particular experience in your emotional heart area? We just be curious. Can you have some experience in your emotional heart area? Is that oscillating with some sense of spaciousness? Coexisting with spaciousness? Does it obliterate spaciousness? Is there some way in which, in fact, we can know form, emotion, sensation, and spaciousness simultaneously? Or do they seem to want to oscillate? Doesn't matter. Just allow yourself to be with your current experience. And let it sink in. Let it mix with your mental continuum. If you're experiencing spaciousness beyond the extent of your body outline, how are you knowing spaciousness? What is the medium of knowing, awarenessing? Or do you find your awareness is constrained and confined to the limitation of your body? Is that okay? What's the nature of knowing that may expand beyond that, if it's occurring? Is it okay if it doesn't make sense? Can you get a sense of what is occurring in the space of whatever room you are in, whether you're home, online, or you're here? What is the nature of the experience in your space? And what is the nature of the experience for all of us together, wherever we are on this planet? Can we get some sense of what we are collectively sensing? Just a curious question. There's something we are all touching into. Just take another minute or two to just be with your experience, and I will then ring the bell. Do we have a microphone that can walk? You're getting it? Anybody wish to either ask a question or comment on your experience? Louise?
And then Renee.
Well, Harvey, you hit a really deep core thing here.
A deep?
A core thing here.
A core thing, okay.
Yeah, and what I was noticing is that when I felt whatever part of the body you were talking about and the space at the same time, I felt a lot of happiness. And I realized that when I'm focusing on both of those at the same time, there's no room for thought. It's just, like the mental space is taken up.
Can I get a little bit more volume at all?
The mental space is all taken up by focusing on those two things at once. So,
yeah.
And there's just a lot of happiness in that, because there's no thought and stuff. So I was feeling that, and kind of going back with feeling that, And then I had a memory, a childhood memory about being at a place we went in the summer. And there was just an immense feeling of, that kind of went along with the happiness. And then there was a memory of something really sad and traumatic that happened in that place. And then I could feel how that event made it much harder to open. It was like a very tense, it created tension. So that there's sort of a long time body tension I became aware of. And it became much harder to go into the space when I was aware of that body tension. But at some point I was able to, and my sense was there was thunderousness in the space, really stormy. It was very stormy, and somehow opening up to that feeling in my body in that area was created a lot of thunder in the space.
Yeah.
And then, well, just to finish it, then I became aware that, there's lots of other people feeling that kind of thunder. And I wasn't so much aware of the people in the room or thinking, it was more people out around here in this beautiful space around Rice, and just aware of how much thunderousness there is in everybody. And then I thought, there's a thunderousness on this planet at this point that is reaching a crescendo. And, I felt a lot of sadness about that. And in the animals and all sorts of human situations. So that was really powerful.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful example of how there is a kind of intersection between profound states, memories, emotional experiences, larger, global, personal, global, environmental experiences, that there can just be layers that get illuminated. It's not an express stop from sitting in a humanities room and, we hit the Buddha's 3 bodies and no intervening material whatsoever. It's much more usual that as we start clarifying and calming, things just start emerging, and there's information, and it is information that is passing through. It's a large cinematic effulgence, and part of our training is to, in some ways, appreciate both the screen, the non-substantial screen of the basis of our mind, the basic presence of our mind, and that there's always diverse material appearing in that. It's just very rich. And I appreciate your ability to track it and tolerate it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for touching in on it.
Yeah. There was somebody else before.
Petra and Renee.
And
then Joanne.
Renee.
So as you started to give the instructions, I noticed that I could move my awareness towards that area. But when you would say that area, like the scalp or the forehead, I never had this sense of like feeling a scalp. It was more these like minute points in space, and that I could, there was just a sensation in these points of space. It was like there was no inside and outside. It was just really taking like a, like in the math class of a coordinate system on a 3D landscape and points in space. And as the instructions would change, those coordinates changed. And there was a sense of, I could feel the dimensionality, because as you were talking about the feeling into these areas and the tension and relaxing and just experiencing it. It was not in contrast, but also there was, I would notice points in space of color, and those started to even become pinpoints. So even looking at the backpack, there was pinpoints of blue and black and whatnot. And then that was happening in a dimensionality in a certain space. And then the body, and even with the ringing of the sound, there was points in space. So this was happening, and then I started to get nauseous again. I keep getting nauseous. And so there was a point where I'm like, how can I kind of change this nauseousness of trying to find some sense of grounding? But I couldn't. There was just still these sensations, and even trying to, sometimes I know in instructions to kind of find some grounding in your seat. And that was even dissipating. I wasn't able to find that grounding. It was just like sensations in that points in space sensations. I can't even say my butt was sitting on the seat to like ground it. It was just like that sensation in my tailbone. Not even that, just these points in space again. And then between listening to Louise speak and now and having to articulate this, it's like, it feels really tender to think of that. I don't even know why.
Yeah, so again, every one of us is going to relate to any practice very, very uniquely. And the ultimate skill is, the diversity is going to be amazing. And the one thread that I think we do want to flag is that everything is occurring in some kind of spaciousness, spacious awareness. But it can include a lot of different pleasurable, unpleasurable, kinesthetic, oral, visual, different types of experiences. And I just appreciate your willingness to go along on the ride and experience what you've experienced and share it. Thank you. Yeah. Petra?
Yeah, I try to find the right words in English. I noticed when I listened to Renee that what I experienced got better. So I felt also nauseous, but I got stuck in the process in my skull. And so first, when you started to go through the body, I felt really, oh, that's nice, and like this movement, and was very good. And then you talked about the scalp. The scalp is the bones here everywhere, I guess. The skull is the scalp.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I was busy, oh, scalp, what does it... I had a lot of reactions to this word.
The word.
And then I was in my head, and I was somehow stuck in my bones.
Uh-huh.
And I had this pressure here, and I stayed with it. And then my body started to go into a process with my heart. That my heart wanted to get maybe what would you say, to get stronger, to dominate the process. So my heart was shivering, and I was in my head and that, and so it was very interesting. And at the end, I had this feeling when I'm stuck in my bones, or am I my bones? And when I'm pulled into this, and I can't get spacious.
Cannot, yeah.
And that was always this kind of dialogue. But I stayed until the end with this pressure here, and it was very interesting. And I had some colors and also some pictures, but the main focus was always that I was pulled back to my skull.
Yeah, what was the nature of what was going on in your heart?
My heart, it was also, then there was some, what would you say, some dialogue, or my heart was like shivering or like working. And then I had the thought, oh, isn't it my heart which can open everything? And I'm stuck in my head, or but it was not so much this discursive thoughts. It was more the body who was reacting, and like a physical reaction when children are crying, and at the end of crying they're doing this shivering, or I don't know how you, and that was happening here. So it was like a fight with the head and this.
Was there some emotion associated with this, or was it really pretty physiological?
Not really an emotion. It was just letting go. This.
Yeah. So again, a very deep process was initiated, and I appreciate your willingness to share it.
Thank you. And I had for sure the thought, oh, maybe I share it and then I get rid of it.
And that sometimes occurs.
Yeah, I think it is working. So thank you.
Yeah.
Very interesting. I never had this dialogue and meditation.
Seems like a really important dialogue. I mean, in some ways, it's the dialogue of our process on the path, and very helpful to have illuminated so powerfully the strength of the bone and the power of that kind of being solidly engaged in that, and then so at the very interesting, at the very same time, this completely different opportunity from your heart. And it is, I agree with you, it's interesting. And I think it's an important dialogue and an analogous dialogue to the various dialogues we have been talking about between form and space, appearance and emptiness, stillness and movement. And since you mentioned it, I had wanted to ask both Louise and Renee also, how does it feel having spoken about this right now?
It feels relieving. I already felt this when you talked, very interesting. And now I still have a little sense here, but it's better. I'm no more as nauseous.
Yeah.
Arriving here. So.
Thank you. The consequences of talking, I think, are also always very interesting to observe. Sometimes you might have different feelings about it. It might bring clarity. It might feel like some relief. It might feel like maybe it was so private it shifted in some way, maybe in a way that's helpful, maybe in a way that isn't. So it's just interesting. Okay, now Louise has raised her hand. So, yeah, go ahead. Do you want to follow up on this? Okay.
I had a huge urge to express it and to share it, and I knew that would be all right. So that was important.
Definitely.
And I didn't add one other thing, is even at the end when I had such a thunderous feeling of thunderousness in everybody, or in lots of us, the space really helped. The space, going back into the space could contain it. So that was really helpful. And there was just a huge urge, thunderous in me, that feels it needs to be expressed. So anyway.
Wow.
That's just, anyway.
It's very sweet knowing that, in general, I think of you as more reticent than thunderously wanting to express. So that's already, quite a thing. No? Robert says no? Oh, okay.
You look very thunderous, actually.
Yeah.
Simon's got his hand up.
I just want to say one other thing. This keen awareness of points that you were talking about, Renee. I mean, that is a very different experience of self and being, and it could be. And I'm just thinking of kind of powerful passages in Buddhaghosa where he talks about, there's a point, and he's talking about Theravada Vipassana practice, but it echoes, it seems to me, your experience. I don't know if you remember this. He talks about a point where you're just seeing points, and then finally you're just seeing the you're seeing rising and ceasing, and then you're only seeing ceasing. So maybe you were in the, and that I think he calls it fear and terror. You know, it's a very disruptive experience of ordinariness, which, so, I mean, I guess I wondered if the nausea was, you know, partly a kind of vertigo, spiritual vertigo, something like that. If that's helpful. Yeah. Okay, Simon, and I don't know if I have...
Claire had a mini hand up.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't see your hand, Claire. It'll go back to you.
Simon?
Can you hear me? When we do these meditations,
Ice cream, yeah.
When we do these meditations, I feel like I'm always anticipating or hoping for a profound and dramatic experience. And typically that isn't the case. But what was interesting this morning is that there were times during the process that you were leading, Harvey, when my mind was a million miles away. I was making shopping lists or, you know, rearranging the furniture in my living room. But that didn't seem to impede or interfere with my body's responsiveness to your instructions. And it made me feel like there are other ways of listening than, you know, than the kind of focused paying attention that we typically think of, because I was relaxing and I was feeling everything that you were suggesting, even when I was not present in a conventional sense. And it reminded me of this supplication that I used to do. I forget, I don't know when it was, but there was one line, and I think it was, you know, grant your blessing so that I realize distraction and non-distraction make no difference. So that, I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is extraordinarily important. There are modes of instruction, especially if any of us have been exposed to kind of conventional sutric, let's say, teachings on calm abiding, shamatha, samatha, shine. And there is a description of, like, how thoughts gradually cease, and, you know, subtle thoughts, and finally no thoughts. And so we all kind of get a little bit obsessive about, you know, zero tolerance policy of thoughts. And I think that of the many obstacles can arise in training is one big one, where you then can get so focused on, am I having thoughts or am I not having thoughts, that this other mode of knowing, which you are alluding to, which is awareness, and maybe awareness through the body or mediated through the body, or just awareness where you're knowing that I am calming down, things are deepening, there is a knowingness. And, you know, one of the tracks of the 8-track tape is still doing shopping and is still rearranging furniture, and maybe at the same pace as normal or a little bit slower. And I think it's very, very important for all of us to be able to appreciate that we can have, in a way, multiple modes of consciousness simultaneously, or it's just important. And that realization and ordinariness can coexist. And it is important to sometimes have, you know, Mormon Tabernacle Choir moment of realization where it's like completely still, or completely love, or completely light, whatever. They're very, very important in practice. But it's also very, very important to see that there's calm and there's depth and there's shopping lists. Very, very important as well. So I really appreciate your sharing that.
Yeah.
Claire, do you want to say
Claire?
something?
So I wasn't actually going to share this until Petra spoke, and then I was like, oh, I think this would be an interesting counterpoint. So, you know, you mentioned kind of feeling like stuck in your skull. I had almost like an opposite experience where, you know, as you were kind of guiding us, Harvey, quickly through the body, you know, I was bringing attention to those areas they were releasing. And then when you got to the scalp and you were really like staying there longer, like as my attention got more sort of like granular and like more focused in on that scalp area, that's actually when the spaciousness just sort of kicked in before you mentioned that sense of spaciousness. And I've been struck before by, you know, y'all saying that, like, I'm sure you never actually said like this exact thing, but I can't remember what you did exactly say, but, you know, like you don't kind of get to the ultimate by skipping the conventional. Like you have to go right into the conventional to get to the ultimate. And it just kind of felt like, you know, rather than trying to open my mind out, which is often how I, you know, if I think of spaciousness, I often think of like something beyond the boundaries of my body. And it was interesting that by going very, very, very small, it actually opened out to this sense where, you know, I knew there were physical boundaries to my head, but they didn't have any feeling, they didn't restrict my sense of where my mind was. And then that kind of opened out for the rest of my body too. But it came about through that very small, specific focus.
Yeah, and so I think what you're saying is it's a pretty significant observation, and you know, there could be one good word and one bad word or bad phrase, and one is one could take a transcendental approach to meditation, and that would be to kind of transcend everything and to go into space and go into wisdom, go into awareness. We sometimes also talk about making end runs or a spiritual bypass of all of the details of worldly existence to arrive at a kind of spacious openness. And sometimes that's effective and sometimes it works. And it's also the case that there can be a lot of profundity arrived at through the details. And Tantra, in many, many ways, is really an approach of details being path and fruition. So we're using all these very, very specific visualizations and mantras and sounds, and they are ultimately not seen as, they're really portals to realization. They're not obstacles to realization. And so, you know, it's actually interesting, even the moment, you know, if you were to go on a, let's say, a Theravada meditation retreat and the teacher were teaching you about calming your mind and would be saying, you know, like, we have to be in a quiet place and let's everybody be quiet and sit very, very still. And, you know, just close your eyes and put your attention on the tip of your nose and just the very, very tip of your nostril. And that's a very effective means of practice. And then there's Rinpoche standing up and says, open your eyes and open your ears and open your everything and take it all in. And it's a different subway system. They're both effective, but they just do things differently. And it's important to recognize that we could get attached to one way or the other. And, you know, my intentionality in offering this morning is just to see how spaciousness and form might interdigitate, in particular using the sensing and the sound. A lot of what we're doing is visual and sound. It's both mantra and visual. But I think some of us are in some ways more kinesthetic, and I think it's important to see and appreciate that space and sensing solidity can be in some kind of interesting dance, and just how is that for every individual? Does anybody online have anything to say or offer or ask? Now is your moment. There's a hand down there. Ani Ladun, I see you. Hi, Ani Ladun.
Hi. Hello.
Hi.
So I really like this meditation, partly because I think within the context of the retreat. Can you hear me okay?
Gary, can we get a little more?
Or maybe you can speak just
Can
a
you hear
little
me
louder.
okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what I got out of this meditation this morning, I think was different, partly because of the context of the Dzogchen retreat. So when you came down into the head, for me, what I began realizing is normally I would just like sense my head, like how my head feels. But this time, what I was aware of is as you were moving between the front and the sides and the back, I was aware of my awareness looking for the front or the sides or the back, or am I on the inside or the outside? And is there an inside and outside? And so when I would start to reach these points of that everything was really not there, my mind would like want to go away and disassociate from the experience of there being a contact with something that's very insubstantial. And so the practice for me was to stay present to that experience of there being no solidity or no inside or outside, or when you came to the top of the ears, which I had experience of tension, and then I would go, well, what is tense? What is feeling? What is that sensation? How do I know this? And so it was kind of getting literally lost in my head. But the part of it for me was to stay awake and aware and not move away from something that felt so different. And so it was really valuable because I feel like it's moving out of the body part and coming into the Dzogchen element of the practice. And so I don't quite know what it means, but it was quite different. And I stayed in wondering as opposed to figuring it out.
Wow.
Yeah, so you're saying something enormously profound.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm not remembering the exact phrase you used, but you were playing around with your ears, and you weren't being able to settle with what's going on here. And one of the things that we do, and you were doing this naturally, and I think it's because you're so immersed in Buddhist practice, is one way to talk about it is we might do something like, where is the self? Is the self in this consciousness or that consciousness? Is it in this moment of sensing my ear? Is it from the inside or the outside? And in that kind of looking, which is, I nowadays am using in English close looking for the practice of special insight. Often in Pali it's vipassana, in Tibetan laktong, in Sanskrit vipassana. It's the word literally means intensified looking.
Mm-hmm.
Pasha means look, and V is a kind of an intensifier or a marker of analysis or separation or discrimination. I like Alan Wallace uses close minding. I like close looking. Whatever, you were looking closely at your experience and you weren't being able to settle. And we come from a culture where we all had to have an answer in elementary school, high school, college, and even graduate school.
Right.
And interestingly enough, in the Buddhist practice of looking for the self or identifying something like solidity, it is excellent to look and all of a sudden just get this sense of like almost bewilderment. And in Tibetan, there is a phrase that our early teacher, Khetsen Sangpo, used, and he used it a lot, and it quite imprinted on us, and it's Tsel La Ma Nye Ba. Tsel there is, it's probably spelled different.
Tsela. It's not cell. It's
not
search. It's tse.
Tse.
Searching, right?
Tse? Well, anyway.
Like Dr. Che.
Is it aspirated or not?
I don't know.
Anyway, Tse La, it means although seeking or searching. Tse La, the La there is an although marker. Ma is a negator. Nye is to obtain ma nye pa. So you're looking, but you're not finding, or seeking, but not finding. And part of the process of that is actually tolerating the not finding, tolerating the bewilderment. And that is the moment in a way of letting go of one trapeze and moving to the other trapeze. And it's like, ah! And most of us have been both emotionally and cognitively educated in our culture not to tolerate that. It's not okay when the elementary school teacher says, what is 2 + 2, for anybody to say, I'm having a moment of wonder.
Yeah.
That's not okay. And there's a lot of emotional resistance to not knowing.
Right.
And that is, the ordinary mind goes on strike when we arrive at not knowing, because we think we're bad, we don't think we're getting it, there's got to be an answer. And it's a very, very important territory to be able to learn to tolerate, appreciate, and ultimately abide in, of this, it's not coming.
Right. Or well, it's not coming in the way that maybe I normally would have wanted it, but it is coming because this is what's so.
Exactly.
And for me, it was also the awareness of, as I was following what you were saying and then meeting what was happening and then recognizing the point where my mind wants to go somewhere else because I'd rather not be there, or the part of the mind that wants to disassociate or says, oh, this is boring, let's move on to something else.
Yeah.
And instead maintaining just kind of this contact with that experience. And so it was different, and I really liked it. It was, there wasn't anything that I came away with other than just experiencing that experience.
Yeah. And you're articulating close looking in a beautiful manner. So just very much appreciate your sharing that. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, there was another thing that you said also that struck me, which was towards the beginning of what you said, that you were very aware of the consciousness looking, kind of looking that what your consciousness or awareness was doing in that process. So it sounded like, that also sounded quite interesting, that because often we're just so connected to the object, and that you had that awareness. I don't know if there's anything more you'd like to say about that, but that also seems important as part of the more sort of Dzogchen side of your experience.
Let's see if I can put it into words. So just kind of going back to the beginning, when you were going through the process of this type of practice, I've done this practice before in other experiences, and it's like, feel your head, feel your eyes, feel your nose, all that sensation part of it. So what was different for me in this is, as I would start to meet the front of my head, it would be what front of what head, where, who's meeting what, you know? So there was this kind of thing of the fluidity of that there wasn't anything solid. And so it would be that I'm going towards the front of my head. Am I inside of it? Am I outside of it? And there wasn't a reference point.
Yeah. What's that like?
Yeah. So it was like hearing, well, it was like I'm hearing the words and staying close to the map that you're guiding me on. And as I'm following around to these different points of the head, I was aware that there is not really a head there, but I'm sort of following the conventional where my head would be. And then I would arrive there and go, okay, nothing here. So it's a kind of a funny juxtaposition. I don't know if that makes sense. It's hard to put it into words.
You're doing great. And
seldom.
I'm assuming, but I could be wrong, that you're familiar with the gloss of emptiness as an absence of reference point. And so often in Tibetan, when there's an instruction to rest in emptiness, they will say ma mikpa. Ma again is a negation, and mikpa, it can mean two things. It can mean many things, but it's sometimes a target, a reference point, or a point of reference. And ma mikpa is a gloss of shunyata, of emptiness. It's a state without a point of reference. And so to the extent that we can get tolerant of an experience where it feels like we've lost our orientation, it's actually for practice extraordinarily useful. And I do agree with Anne that, you know, some of this nausea that may be, we never know, we just have to be curious. You know, an absence of reference point can be disorienting and may even be affecting our third ear. You know, it's just, ooh. So, again, we have so much acculturation in our culture to have the specific reference point, the specific answer, to be able to articulate. It's actually, in Buddhist practice, wonderful when we find ourselves speechless, confused, and not knowing. And so it's a completely different placard that we're walking around with in this context than the one we're normally trained in our culture. So thank you for sharing that so much.
Thanks.
Yeah. We would have time for one more. Anybody?
Huh?
Ken?
Okay, and Wendy?
And then Wendy, and then, yeah. There we are, Ken. We can't hear you yet.
Okay. So as I lost a sense of solidity in my head, eventually the pains in my body came into my awareness, but different from my typical gross or subtle resistance, they felt very precious. They felt like, and they didn't really have a location either. That my knees, pains in my head, were just kind of out there like little lights, and I started to feel a sense of warmth, kind of a warm holding of them, almost a motherly feeling in my belly. And it was very liberating to relate to pain in that way.
Yeah.
Rather than immediately jump to a cure or some kind of a thing. That warm, precious, I resonate with what's been said in that regard as far as those points and the relationship to those points, and that feeling of warmth was really beautiful.
Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying, and I'm tempted to say that, you know, in basic, you know, we go all the way back to Theravada or the Tibetan teachings on mind and its mental factors, or the Abhidharma. I mean, shared with all Buddhist schools, there are 6 consciousnesses. And one of them is sensing consciousness and mind consciousness and seeing, tasting, smelling, hearing. And I may have missed one, but touch. Yeah, touch consciousness. That's the important one here. The classic way of really describing where we go awry is that our ordinary mind is kind of slow and our actual experience is relatively rapid. And if we're not paying too close attention, we tend to glom all these different consciousnesses into a thing, which is a self. And as we start attending more carefully, even if it's not articulated as a particular style of practice, we're becoming a little bit more attuned to the specific consciousnesses. And so some of you, in talking, are really talking about, I just had a much clearer sense of sense consciousness. And if we really get into sense consciousness, ultimately, it may or may not have a sense of being located somewhere. It's an interesting issue. And just as you're saying, I mean, you know, it wasn't exactly located somewhere. And you're really talking about a deconstruction, a partial deconstruction of the normal sense of self, where you're having these constituent experiences rather than the glom together total thing. A bit like the point of the firebrand, not the firebrand circle. If you're moving a point of light at night and it becomes a circle, you're saying, I was actually noticing the points. And that's a different experience. And there was also, in terms of the mind settling, there can often be a richness, a fulfillment to the mind settling. So everything you're saying is, it's wonderful to hear. And, it's really, really appreciate you sharing it. Thank you. Where are you, Ken?
New Mexico, Corrales.
Corrales. Okay. All right. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you over the internet. And there
Maybe
was
Wendy. Maybe that'll be
that will be the last one before we take a break. Where is Wendy? There you
I'm right here. I just, I hope my video doesn't cut out because it just did. But I just wanted to thank Ani for her comments because I felt very similar and her explanations were great. I did want to talk about when you hit the bell and what I experienced, because you said that to take away your reference point and kind of trace it back. And I was able to do that. And I could just feel the sensation between my ears. And it just, and then you said, see where it goes, and it just dissolved. But I've been having some experiences during this retreat about just with the sense of sight and almost feeling like things turn into more of a 2 dimensions rather than 3 dimensions, talking about losing your reference point, kind of. That's been really interesting for me to, investigate.
Yeah.
But then when it came down to my heart, it was all emotion. It's just like,
yeah.
Oh, I started crying, and it just, there seems to be a lot of emotion there for me.
Yeah. So the body is actually incredibly rich. The second line of our refuge is channels, winds, essential drops are in their ultimate nature, bodhicitta. That's very, very profound. And even on the way to that, there's a lot of current thinking and exploration that the body is a kind of repository of layers and layers of our experience. And again, I think many of us would just as soon do an end run on all of that. And if it were possible for people to do that successfully, I would counsel you to do it. But I don't think it is. It's not in my experience, and not my experience of people I've talked with, and not people. You know, I once talked to a very, very dedicated Theravada meditator. He was really, really advanced, and he said, you know, I was doing great, and then 8 years into it, one day I just sort of fell over on my side, and I was bawling, and it was about my relationship to my mother. And, you know, like, where did that come from? And it came from the fact that we're human beings, and at least in this culture, there's a lot we carry in our bodies, and it just seems to, if we don't honor it, it kicks us in the ass. I can't say it any more gently than that. It just does. And so it comes up. When we sit quietly, stuff comes up. Whatever the tradition, whatever the Sangha, whatever the community, I've got, yes, 50 years of sitting in spiritual communities, and people experience stuff. And we want to just honor that that's part of the dynamism of reality. And in our culture, we actually have some tools for facilitating the movement through that dynamism. If you get stuck in your dynamism, you just get stuck. And we want to facilitate moving through it. This is not, you know, training in psychotherapy, but it is acknowledging that we have emotional and physical issues that are going to occur in our spaciousness. And we just want to be able to honor that as part of the process. It's not where the process is leading ultimately, but it would be the same thing if you came in here and told me, I just eat Twinkies. I would say we need to talk. It's not going to support your spiritual realization of the true nature of mind if you're just eating Twinkies. But it would be the same, you know, when I was 26 years old, I would have told you I don't want to feel any emotion because those are distracting me from Buddha Dharma. And that would be the same, essentially, as saying, I want to eat just Twinkies. And I got into a lot of trouble. And I see people getting into a lot of trouble. So, you know, this stuff comes up. Yeah, so there are tears in your heart. Many of us have tears in our heart. And the fact that you can feel that is wonderful. You know, for many of us, we can't even feel the tears in our heart. All we feel is the concrete bunker. You know, so that's also a stage of experience. It's a very, very rich process, and it's just part of it. Ultimately, we want to realize our Buddhahood. But I think it's important for us to be able to name, you know, in Buddhism, they talk about the kleshas. The kleshas are 84,000 kleshas. And it turns out there are some ways of facilitating the dissolution of the kleshas so they become more cloud-like. And modern understanding of the mind can help. Okay, we should take a break. What?
No, nothing.
What?
Do we do our dedication after the break or before the break?
You want to do a dedication?
Okay.
Short dedication.
Just a short one. By this good may I swiftly once become a great guru, lead all beings, everyone, to reach to that very ground. Break. We'll be back. If you would please be back, settled at 5 off.